Hello, Yinzers. My name is Abraham Klein, and what you're about to hear is an interview with myself and a friend of mine by the name of Anthony Frazier. Mr. Anthony Frazier, if you're familiar with at all with the local Indiana County area, you may have seen him at different events. He typically goes around with a camera. He's not hard to miss. He's pretty tall, but yeah, you'll typically see him there with a camera, and he often MCs different events, and sometimes and often provides music as well. So definitely very active. He also hosts his own a radio program on 1160 WCCS radio and 101.1 FM on WCCS radio in Indiana County called the Acoustic Hour. So if you're familiar at all with him in that respect, you might know the name Anthony Frazier. But recently I got a chance to sit down with him. We were actually at a local event a couple weeks ago at the time of this recording, and we sat down. I believe we were at this. Yeah, we were at the S&T Bank Arena, and we sat down and talked a little bit about an interesting event in his life. Now, Mr. Frazier is African American. And he actually, due to different experiences, went to a Ku Klux Klan meeting. And it was for educational purposes, according to what he says here in this interview. And very interesting. So we sat down and talked about that experience as well as what he learned. And we also got to discuss his different thoughts on just different issues going on in the world. And it's a very interesting interview. So without further ado, here's the interview. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you're as interested in it as I was. So again, here is my interview with Mr. Frazier. So tell me, Anthony, you've had some experience with hate groups apparently in the past, and so tell me about that. Like, what was your experience as far as how you first got involved with stuff like that?
Well, I want to give you the short version of it. I worked with juvenile services back with the Delphi Village for a number of decades, and I had seen early on an unusual trend in the type of activities some of the kids being placed were involved in.
Yeah.
Grouping, gangs, hate kind of things, attacking each other, abuse, drugs, and whatever. And so what I started doing, looking a little further, and I started seeing some patterns, and not only in the youth that I work with here in Indiana, but I was able to go around to different programs throughout the region and see these same things. And so I began to get concerned and start asking questions, well, what's happening, why is this happening, and begin to do assessments on these young folks.
Yeah.
Now, I grew up in an era where I was well aware of what the Klan was and that role, and particularly in civil rights and things like that. So I knew that real well, but I hadn't seen it up close. And so these kids were coming in, young kids were coming in with a variety of issues that were, and tattooing, graffiti, paraphernalia, that were related to different types of things. And this was gangs, cults, and all kinds of things. So I started putting it together and saying, let's take a look at that. And as the short of it was, I became a specialist, gang cult specialist for the agency, and was able to then develop tools, treatment tools, and I then wind up training folks on how to assess, deal with, and to run groups, therapy groups, treatment groups, how to get kids out of these different groups and gangs and what have you.
Yeah.
That even elevated me to more regional stuff outside of the agency, where I was invited to speak to police officers, judges, and teachers and schools and things like that. And so, which I had gotten myself into this is long before there were suppression units and long before there was specialization to deal with these things. So I really started raising some questions, running some groups, therapy groups, talking directly with the kids that are involved.
Yeah.
And so much dealing with families as well. And so begin to document this information anecdotally and begin to track it. And then as a result of that, because we had youth in so many different counties, I started getting calls. Hey, what about this? We're seeing this, we're seeing that, we're seeing this, what have you. So I developed the treatment tools, assessment tools, this, that, and the other. And so the agency adopted those tools. And to this day, they still use those tools. The trainings that I developed back then, they still use today. And I think that's pretty fascinating to be able to do that and to be able to do that. And the idea is that it took me into environments where I was able to go to rallies, gang and cult and Klan rallies and see firsthand some of the things that most folks don't see or want to ever see.
Yeah.
So there's an educational piece. There's what exactly is a cross lighting? What exactly do these symbols mean?
Yeah.
How do these folks actually get along? Where does the hatred come from?
Yeah.
And so I began to ask those questions, and so I went to the source and I started talking to the folks involved in it, the neo-Nazis, the skinheads, the Klan, and all the other anti-government folks, anti this, that, and the other. And I found some very interesting patterns.
Yeah.
When folks talk about hate, they tend to lump hate into a whole bunch of things. If I disagree with you, that means I hate you.
Right.
We have this colloquial word saying hate, right?
Yeah, right.
But we really don't use hate correctly. We say, "Oh, I hate spinach," right?
Right.
Versus, "I hate someone because of they're gay or they're black." And when you hear people say things like that, you tend to say, "Well, hate," the word hate. But we have a misunderstanding of what hate is, and we conflate and just throw everything into hate.
Yeah.
If I disagree with you, then you must hate me.
Yeah.
I can disagree with you. That doesn't mean I hate you.
Exactly.
But we've gotten away from disagreeing. Everything is hate. So I think we've kind of dumbed down what hate is, or we've marginalized what hate is to say, well, hate is the Klan. Hate is someone carrying a torch talking about Jews who would not replace us. And my thing is, no, hate's much deeper than that. In other words, imagine someone saying, we're going to go into everyone's house, and if we had a hate meter and said, do you have hate in this house? If we do, we're going to stop it. That's insane. You're never going to erase someone wanting to hate.
Right.
It's always going to be there. But we'll talk about the Klan a little bit. And the issue with the Klan, I'm showing you a couple of pictures that happened these were decades ago, where I actually attended. I think this was in Punxsutawney.
Yeah.
At their high school, junior high school, one of the schools.
Yeah, and they allowed this at the high school.
Oh yeah, they did.
Wow.
They did. They allowed, and they had to, because if you apply for a permit, you can apply for a permit to march and what have you. So the content of that, though, you can't really discriminate. So if someone says, well, we want to have this march, we want to have this rally, and then they fill out the paperwork, they pretty much can do it.
Yeah.
As long as they don't go in and destroy things. And that's different when you get vandalism.
Right.
Now, even though the Klan is known, has a deep, horrid history in this country in terms of killings, mutilations, firebombings, and the list goes on. And this country is still dealing with the issues of this type of hatred that even now, they're talking about. You've heard the case where the Virginia governor was seen in blackface standing next to, and people were just in there. You see the fighting now. They're angry. He should step down. She should do this. And even now, but if you go back to the 70s and 80s in yearbooks, you're going to find a lot of folks dressed up in Klan outfits and blackface. Yeah. So what are you going to do? Fire everybody who's put a Klan hood on? You're going to fire everyone who you got to. And again, outrage is one thing, but again, we're throwing everything into a basket. You say, well, if you put blackface on, then you must be racist. And we're throwing races around. And again, these are very serious and complicated issues. If you have, I'll give you an example. In the issue where the young man, the governor, was supposedly racist for putting on blackface or standing next to a guy in a Klan. He would say, well, that's racist. And I would say, how do you know based on a picture? I'm a photographer. I can take pictures that are completely out of context.
Right.
How can you judge someone's character based on a picture? We have to be able to step back and say, is there a pattern of discrimination? Is there a pattern of prejudice? Is this person espousing hatred, Jews, blacks, gays, or whatever? Yeah. If you have that, coupled with that, then you can say there's a case for that. But we're too quick to jump in and say, and we're losing our mind.
Yeah. So take me to that time, like say the first time you went to a Klan rally or something like that,
Yes.
like, what was your, like, feeling going in? Did you feel like you were in danger? Did you feel like, what was your expectation, and what was their reaction when they saw you walk in there?
Well, yeah, that's pretty precious. I went
Yeah.
when I had decided. My decision to go is because I was looking for information. I was asking people questions about, well, what does the Klan think? What do you think? And folks couldn't answer that question.
Yeah.
I went to the library. I went around. Look, where can I get this information? This was pre-internet stuff. So I said, you know what? I'm going to look around town, see what's going on. And I got a list of where the Klan rallies were.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going. And when I said I was going, let alone my reaction, others who knew I was going were shocked. You're going to do what?
Wow.
You're going to go where? I said, yeah. And he said, what, are you out of your complete mind? I said, no. As a matter of fact, the director of the agency called me down to his office in Latrobe and asked me, are you going to go to a Klan rally? I said, yep. He says, okay. And he didn't say another word. But I could tell in his questioning, the people were more shocked than I was. I was going to educate myself and to learn. I wasn't so much fearful or afraid of that. That never entered my mind.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I took a Jewish guy with me.
Oh,
there you go.
Wow.
That sounds like a joke. A black guy and a Jewish guy go to Klan.
Yeah.
Well, we went. I wasn't concerned at all. I wanted to go educational reasons. I wanted to see what was happening.
Yeah.
So it was one in Punxsutawney, and my buddy, my co-staff member, drove there, and I said to him, "Here's some conditions. What we don't want to do is put ourselves in danger." And he said, "Okay." I said, "If we have to go down a long, windy road, it's probably a good idea not to do that because you get locked in." I said, and if we go into a place, we want to make sure we have a way to get out very quickly if we have to leave. He said, fine. We go up to Punxsutawney. We're driving down this long, windy road. And I said, this is not good. And he looks at me and said, do you want to continue? I said, there was a state police there. And I was a little concerned because this road was leading into this gentleman's house, and his name is here. I don't know if you want to say his name or not, but that's who it was.
Okay.
We were going down to his house, and I said, okay, we pulled in, and right at the bottom of the gate, there was a guy dressed in fatigues. He was obviously a member of the Klan, and he had a gun in his hand, a rifle in his hand, and he leaned down and said, you all want to go in there? And I said, yes, and he looked at me, and he looked at the coworker, and he stood up, and then when he stood up over the car, he had the gun, so the gun with his finger on the trigger was right at the window so we could see it. So he was intimidating us, basically.
Right.
So my coworker looked at me and he was like shaking his head, let's get out of here, let's not, this is not good. I said, we got to go. I said, when you get to the top of this hill in this house, turn the car around so that we can get ready to go. We don't have to stay.
Yeah.
He leans back down and says, okay, go ahead up. So we go right up into this, and it's all bumpy going up in this hill. And the minute the car stopped, I said, you got to turn the car around so that we have to leave. He said, okay. We get up to the top. Bam, he's out of the car and gone. I go, oh, this is not good. So I get out the car, and over on the left, there was skinheads and neo-Nazis playing hacky sack. They turned around. Have you ever seen a deer when you come around the corner and the deer stops and looks at you? That's what the look was to me from them. They looked at me like, what are you doing here? And they froze. And I said, hey, and one of the kids, I still remember, had a shirt they called Boys in the Hood. Yeah. And he had the Klan hood from the movie Boys in the Hood.
I've seen
and
that.
I thought, I want to get me one of those shirts. So I wasn't thinking about the inherent danger because there were other people there. It was like an open kind of thing, so it wasn't at night. And so I went in and I started looking around, and I saw the cross that they had, that they burned, and I learned something about the cross. I hadn't seen it up close. Yeah. This thing is massive. And it's well put together, and it's lit up so that it can it's not to burn down, it's to illuminate, it's to stay up for a while they have their thing. So I didn't notice. So I went over and watched and I saw how well it was put together, and it's put together in pieces, and then they put it and then they light it. So it was very interesting. Then I walked over to the table, looked at their paraphernalia, and very expensive. They were selling this stuff. Pins of $25 and things like that. Huh. I really wanted to get some of them so I could use them for my presentation. Right. But they were really expensive. The short of it was, and then as I turned to walk back to the other side, I could see someone running at me, and then I thought, uh-oh, let the fun begin. I turned around, and it was a newspaper reporter, and he said, "You want to join?" And I said, one rule for you, never run up behind a black man at a Klan rally. Just never do that. And he said, "I'm really sorry," but he was from the Punxsutawney Spirit.
Yeah.
He wanted to interview me.
Yeah.
So the Klan guys said, "Well, if you want to do that, you got to do it down at the bottom of the driveway." So a little bit later, I found my buddy, my coworker. I said, "Let's go. We're going to go down here and interview us." So we went back down the hill, right outside the gate that we were in. And as we were standing there, he was interviewing me. The other Klan members were coming in, putting on the hoods. And the whole trail of, this went on for like 15, 20 minutes of different Klan neo-Nazis, and they were watching us. We were right by the gate watching them go in.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting.
Yeah.
And almost and I don't mean this it was kind of cartoonish, if that makes it seem, because if you ever see. I got the same feeling when I was at a gang rally. They had the different kids in different colors. It's kind of cartoonish almost.
Yeah.
So I got a chance to experience that, and I learned a great deal from there. But I also learned there's a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
You know, when the Klan comes to town, people are ready to fight, and there's angry, there's tension. They did peace rallies. I wasn't afraid. I wanted to learn what was going on so that I could best impact the kids that I work with.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to know, where is this hatred coming from? Where is this anger coming from? And I did know that if I had gone there at night after they had been drinking and things like that, it would be a different outcome.
Right. Yeah.
So I was well aware of that. I wasn't naive.
Yeah. So you mentioned you went there for educational purposes.
And treatment.
What did you learn? Like what you said, you wanted to find out where the hatred was coming from and why they hate it. And obviously everybody has different reasons, but what did you learn from this?
That's a great question. Structural.
Yeah.
Much of how we learn to get along and not get along has a lot to do with our environment and who's near us. Our cousins, our uncles, our mothers, our fathers, our best friends, what have you. What I saw from that I've been to several of them, there is a consistency. There's a small group-mindedness. There is an absolute fear of other people. And that fear, that xenophobia that we talk about in the broader sense, that in our country we're saying America is afraid of immigrants and what have you. What's happening in particularly these white cultures, is the fear that blacks, gays, and Jews and all these other folks are going to take stuff from them. There is a belief that that's happening, not in a theoretical sense, but in a real sense. So their reaction to you or to me is fearful, is real, is legitimate in their mind. They see you as a threat.
Right.
Now, the other thing I found out is that the neo-Nazis, the skinheads in the Klan, they literally hate each other.
Wow.
They would beat each other to death if they could. But when they see that threat of, let's say, an immigrant, a black, a Jew, or whatever, a Jewish person, then they all band together and focus on them. When that threat is gone, they fight each other. So this issue of hate is also towards each other. Yeah.
Now, I remember you mentioned when we were talking even before the interview that there's a difference between the Klan and the neo-Nazis and the skinheads and all that.
The Klan and neo-Nazis and skinheads, and you got you got rebels within each. The old Klan versus the new Klan, the skinheads and the neo-Nazis, they're all different. Most folks see it as that's just white supremacy. They see it as that's just craziness. We need to understand something. If you want to, my grandmother told me years ago, decades ago, if you want to solve a problem, you first have to be able to define it. And identify it. And when you do, you can say, okay. Now you say, what did I learn? I learned that it was structural. I learned that it was also connected to families. And I also, and these folks actually believe Hi guys. These folks actually believe. Now you get stragglers and kids just want to be a part. Like if you see here in this picture, not all these kids are on the same level of hatred
Right.
against this, that, and the other. Some of this is association. Some of this is just being friends with so and so.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if she hates, I hate too.
Yeah.
So not all this stuff is deep rooted. But what is deep rooted is when you get these guys up here. These are the older. This is the old Klan.
Yeah.
You can tell by the outfits. I mean the way that they dress. The old Klan was much more. It was tied legally. It was legal. The civil rights. They pushed back against civil rights. They pushed back against the Northern.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty embedded. And they pretty much did this out of fear. This stuff was to be worn to disguise themselves, to terrorize community, and they did. Firebombing. I mean, they have the Klan has a horrid history in this country.
Yeah.
But they do not own hatred.
Right.
You can say something with Nazism, hatred. You see what I mean? You can go back to Hitler and those folks.
Yeah.
They had nothing to do with these guys, so they don't have a lock on hatred.
Right.
So I learned that it's systemic. It is related. These folks believe in it because
Yeah.
their elders believe in it. So
Yeah.
when they see this in it, and the hardships that they have, the more they hate the exterior.
Yeah.
So a lot of these folks were in backwoods, not very well living conditions, and they saw people as taking from them, and so they focused on those people, blacks, Jews, and this, that, and the other. So
Yeah.
that's what I learned, and it
Yeah.
was really powerful.
Yeah. So, what would you say are the particular differences between these two, these different groups, these different hate groups, such as the Klan and the neo-Nazis?
Okay, then interesting when you say hate groups. Some of these groups don't see themselves as hate groups. We
Right.
use the word hate groups.
Right.
But
right.
the neo-Nazi groups are more aligned with the Nazi. When you talk about Hitler and that,
Yeah.
they have a structure, lieutenants, and it's more of an army kind of thing.
Yeah.
The what did we say the other groups? I forgot the other group.
The neo-Nazis, the
Skinheads. The
yeah.
skinheads are more a bunch of groups who their attitude is they want to fight systems. They're against any system. They'll burn the system down.
Right.
And they're more the rebels, the anti-everything. They're anti-everything.
They're against everybody.
Everything. They're any system. They want to be able to do what they want. You can't tell us what to do. You do, we'll bash your head in.
Yeah.
They believe that they pretty much can rule and do whatever they want. They are very dangerous. They have no rhyme or reason to what they do, whereas the neo-Nazis do.
Yeah.
They're much more structured, and the neo-Nazis tend to have more the uniforms and
Right.
lieutenant and a structured army, where the neo-Nazis, the skinheads are radical. These are the guys that'll get together and get drunk and just beat up anybody.
Right.
That kind of thing. But they turn on each other. They band together when there's an external threat.
Yeah.
If there's a black family who moves into that area, they will turn on that family. If that black family is no longer there, they turn on each other.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So two things I want to get to real quick is
Sure.
First of all, you were at these meetings. Like,
Yeah.
what in the world do they even talk about at these meetings? You see this guy in this picture, and he looks very passionate. Like he's like talking about something, and like, what do they even talk about at these meetings? Like,
Okay. Now there are different types of meetings. There's rallies.
Yeah.
There are parades. And then there are open houses that they do. Now,
Yeah.
all three of them, they serve 2 to 3 purposes. One purpose is to recruit,
Okay. Yeah.
to let you know you're out there. At this rally where this guy was there. I was there when he was doing this.
Yeah.
He's from the old Klan.
Yeah.
He's screaming stuff and he's antagonizing folks, saying, "Hey, you're black and you're this, you're that," and these kids are screaming back at him. This
Yeah.
is what they want. They want the confrontation.
Yeah.
They want to get a picture of something being attacked, because then they can use that to say, "See, that's how they are. See
Right.
what they're doing to
Right.
us." Okay, so that's what they're doing. The open houses are to try to prove, hey, we're just a regular group, and we're letting you see what we do. We're not hate.
Right.
We just support our race.
Right.
So that's what they want to tamp down. But they have fringe groups like every other group that are radical and will come at you and will harm you. So
Yeah.
this stuff is real, and folks will say, there's no such thing as a Klan. Oh, yes, there is. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You got to understand something. And you're never going to eradicate hate.
Yeah.
You're never going to eradicate people's ability to get together in groups. When they feel disenfranchised, when groups feel that they're marginalized, they will band together. You see it now in our politics.
Right.
So it's not, again, the Klan does not own hate and evil.
Right. Now, I've heard where, like, in the past, Klan people that join the Klan or neo-Nazis and things like, in the past they would join them because it helped get them prominence in, like, government and things like that, especially mostly like in the South. Do you think that that's something, a reason why people would join today, or you think, what with the Klan being a much smaller group today, that's not really a thing anymore?
Well, you said a lot in that question.
Yeah.
First off, hold on. First off, the Klan and groups like that are more splintered because
Right.
they've moved more mainstream.
Okay.
Okay, and so there's a false sense of security that they're gone. They're not
Right.
gone.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and they've melded into political kinds of things. So what you have is folks who are in positions of power who have histories of their families being involved in the Klan for generations.
Right.
So you have that. And that doesn't mean that so-and-so is necessarily believing in that history, but they can't deny that.
Right.
So just as where you come from, you can't deny your lineage.
Right.
So these folks can't either.
Right.
People join the Klan and these supremacist groups for a wave of reasons.
Right.
And should they be able to? Yes. When they start harming others, that's where it gets tricky and that's where it gets illegal. And I think we got to make that distinction.
Yeah.
People have a right to associate into groups.
Right.
Like-minded people.
Right.
And when people feel that they're wrong, when they feel that the government's turned against them, when they feel that the jobs are going to immigrants or blacks or this, or this is threatening this, people now, particularly now with we're here at a gun show.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people who have guns have attitudes of hate?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know.
Yeah,
you can't go around and say,
right.
excuse me, you're going to buy a gun, do you hate people?
Right.
You can't. But the other component I want to tell you is the Klan was unique, and they used religion
Right.
as a shield.
Right.
They used religion. And again, anybody can use religion for anything.
Right.
And so why do people join? They join because they feel it's part, they've always been. They feel a sense of community. They feel this is their best way to deal with that out there, that fear that's out there. And they still do. And today they still join.
Right. So you mentioned that, some of them feel that there's this marginalization. They feel attacked.
Yeah.
In our current atmosphere, we have people that say stuff like, well, the president, they feel like either the president or the current political atmosphere is more white supremacy, things like that. Do you feel that is causing marginalization toward minority groups such as Mexicans and blacks and things like that?
No doubt. But the marginalization issue started long before our current situation.
Oh, yeah.
I think folks can stoke it.
Yeah.
And what's called, you may have heard this called dog whistles.
Right.
When you hear folks say one thing, but they're really saying something else. They're speaking to one group, but they're speaking to another group.
Yeah.
What we're seeing today out in the open is a much more of a flaunting of certain things that can incite people.
Yeah.
Whether it's from the left or whether it's from the right. It has now moved more into our political So it's much more, and whether or not you say it's a particular party who's responsible, you can argue that day or night. My point is this: everyone has a responsibility in leadership with what they say, how they say what they say, and who are they speaking to. They know
Right.
what they're saying. So when you say, when one of the presidents said something about people cling to their guns and this, that, and the other in a
Yeah.
particular country and in a county, what we saw is the people went out and started buying more guns.
Yeah.
You see, so if a leader makes a statement, that has a direct impact on what people do.
Right.
If the president of the United States makes statements or shoots out dog whistles, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, it will have an impact on these groups.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, indeedy.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's scary. So the average person's like, what is going on? The average person may not even be paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, there's a shift. And we know that when the economic issues, when people start feeling stressed economics, they look to blame someone.
Right.
Is it the government? Is it immigrants? What is going on? Because if you now cannot provide for your family, if you now believe that you are disenfranchised, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, okay, and sit there? Or are you going to say, hey, we're getting together to figure out ways to fix this, and you're going to join that group?
Yeah.
So that happens.
Yeah. So again, with the way things are, and obviously, there's always been issues, and what with social media and things
Right.
like that, a lot of that has been sort of blown up
Right.
to the point where it's maybe bigger than it probably actually is. But what am I trying to say here? Do you feel that there's a possibility of sort of causing these sort of hate groups to maybe become less of a thing? Do you feel that there's the possibility of greater unity amongst the races and things like that?
I mean, there's always hope for that. And to be quite honest, as a Christian, I doubt it, because I think what I see is what's most disturbing to me is the carelessness that generally people in power talk to each other.
Yeah.
And how they solve problems and how they relate to each other. That concerns me. I use a classic example. If you were 7 years old and your mother and father yelled and screamed at each other every day, every day yelled and screamed, what would that do to you as a 7-year-old? And you got to understand that the environment that you're in, and particularly when you're controlled by it, has a lot to do with how you see the world.
Yeah.
So if you're around inflammatory, violence, aggressive, your chances of saying, well, let's sit down and talk it out are kind of limited.
Yeah.
I think if people, which you mentioned social media, I think people are using, from my perspective, are using social media in a way that they're using it as a weapon. I try to use it to get people to come together and discuss complicated issues. But I see people use it as a weapon. I see people use the Bible as a weapon.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we have to be cautious in terms of how we talk to each other, how we relate to each other. And we also have to be able to vote, get involved in our voting process, and vote people in based on not what you think they're going to do, but do your homework. Be a part of the political system rather than somebody complaining about it. Understand what your school board does. Understand what your local leaders do. Understand what your state leaders do. And then understand what your federal leaders do. Get involved in that process. And you were in here just a bit. People were talking about running for this, that, and the other. I think that's important. We have to be actively engaged, and I think there is hope in that respect.
Right.
But as long as we sit back and just shout at each other on social media, not a whole lot's going to change.
Now, I hear a lot of different perspectives of how to combat hate. There's people that are say, oh, go to the Klan rallies and punch a Nazi, or stuff like that, or or different ways to combat it. What do you think is the best way to combat hate?
Okay, the first thing is, one of the first things and the easiest thing is to recognize that it's there. Second thing to do is, you don't have to spend your energy fighting hate.
Right.
That's a mistake. What you got to do is spend your energy doing the opposite of that. It's creating an environment where, you know what, you have a right to believe what you want, but here's what we're going to do. We have some standards. Here's how we're going to go about it. Getting problems solved, being able to deal with conflict. And I'm talking about it from a treatment perspective. But the thing is, you can't waste your time. If you see hate as a fire and you have to stamp it out, you're going to be stamping it out for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
What you want to be able to do is say, hey, how are you? Hi, hey man, good to see you, brother. Good to see you. If you want to be able to effectively deal with this issue of hate, and it's a complicated issue, you have to understand, people have a right to hate. However, you want to find out, get to building relationships with people, working with people that are different. And again, on a level, you hear people say things in your private, people say, oh, I hate them, or I hate this, and we'll just say, whatever. But again, we individually are responsible for what we see and do.
Right.
I think politically, we have a responsibility to hold our leaders responsible in how they interact with each other, how they solve problems, how they work together. I think that we need to pull back from throwing everything. We need to stop calling everything hate, and we need to stop attacking each other and start focusing on dealing with problems. What are some problems we need to deal with? You know, in Chicago, 600 kids, was it 600? 600 kids got shot and killed last year, somewhere around it. It's an insane number of young people that were killed, okay? In Chicago. This Jesse Smollett situation, where he apparently may have faked his own assault.
Yeah.
This was on the news. They did for almost 48 hours straight. Yeah. Jesse Smollett. 600 plus kids shot dead in the streets of Chicago. Jesse Smollett. 600 kids, Jesse Smollett. The news focused on Jesse Smollett for almost 48 hours.
Yeah.
Zero focus on the kids shot and killed in the streets. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and we're dealing with a media now that focuses on the sensational rather than the substance.
Yeah.
And we're getting pulled into that. So now we're talking about headlines rather than issues. We need to get away from personality and get back to solving problems. Number one, we can do this. We can work together. We need to bring our faith leaders in. We definitely have to bring our faith leaders in. We need to bring our community people in. We need to pull people in from different backgrounds. We need to stop. We have to stop demonizing groups, religion. We can't demonize. This demonization of it. You can't. You can say, I don't believe that. I believe this. Okay. Is there a bridge? Can we bridge some things together? This is what we need to do. I think there's a lot of work. We can do it. And there are people out there working to do that.
Right.
I do believe that. We don't hear about it. You won't hear about it.
Yeah. So, what happens when you try to maybe build bridges, but they don't want to build bridges back? Like what do you do then?
Okay.
What do you believe happens then?
I ran into that in my field of when I worked in the field. When you're trying to work and you're trying to get people to work together, you're not going to get all the people who want to work. That's a reality you have to deal with. I often say, if you build a bridge for people to use, they may not want to walk over to that point, but at least the bridge is built.
Right.
And the hope is that they will be able to walk over it. But if you are discouraged and say, if you don't work with us, then get out of here. No, the bridge is built for you.
Yeah.
If I'm working to solve problems, I'm going to be helping you anyway, because I'm going to find out that these are some of the issues that need dealt with. So whether you are active participant or not, you still have an invitation to be involved. It's much like when you talk about Christianity, there's an invitation to come to Christ. There's always an invitation. Some people say, it's just like people confuse church with faith, with religion, with this. They throw them all in together.
Right.
Same thing. So what I'm saying is, you provide an opportunity, and you do it from the kindness of your heart. You work together. There's some folks who you're never going to reach. There's some folks who are dangerous that will harm you, and they need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
In terms of they need to either be held accountable or put in jail or what have you. You can't waste your time on those folks.
Yeah.
There are more people out there who need help and need assistance, working together, bringing people in. There must be security.
Yeah.
You have to have security. You can't just let everything happen. You got to have rules. You got to have regulation, and you got to have boundaries. And so, otherwise, you're never going to go anywhere.
Yeah. In closing, getting back to the rallies and things that you went to, what was the result from what you did? Were you able to, in time, build relations and maybe even change some minds from some of the interaction that you had?
Yes, and interesting enough, I was actually supervising some of the very kids who were involved in hate groups.
Okay.
So, in a physical sense, I was in charge of the very kids who hated me.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you do that? And so you have the kids who say, I'm not going to recognize your authority because my parents say that you're stupid.
Yeah.
I'm not going to recognize your authority. But what I found is, it's not so much that they believe that, it's that they've learned to believe that.
Yeah.
So provide another opportunity. So when some of these kids who were really much into hate and blacks, when they saw me interacting and doing different things with kids, helping, solving, working with them, they go, okay, because then they realize, wait, I got problems, I got some things I got to do. And I said, I'm willing to help you too. They're like, really? So, but then that creates a conflict.
Yeah.
Because when they go back home and say, well, this black guy helped me. What do you mean this black guy helped me?
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Right.
So if I demonstrate that, I have a chance of maybe one at a time pulling these folks away from what they're into, particularly with the negative stuff. So it's a hard job.
Yeah.
I learned that you can make a difference in people's lives. People can turn around and do better. Some won't,
right,
but many will.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think maybe that's probably quite a few questions we've gotten in there.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your time, and I really appreciate your story. Definitely interesting. But I think with that, we'll close it. All right?
All right.
All right?
All right.
All right?
All right.
All right?
All right.
All right?